Network executives and smart business decisions go about as well together as forks and microwaves, or water balloons and winter, or illumination and Nintendo. What, too soon? Whether it be corporate mergers killing all of Cartoon Network's best shows, Nickelodeon banishing new cartoons to the Shadow Realm if they don't immediately match the success of one of the most popular cartoons ever created, or Disney and their asinine 3 seasons and you're out rule, it has become common these days for fans to witness a network's treatment of a show and see the writing on the wall. But in the past decade, there is one show whose awful treatment by the network and eventual death came as a shock to many, as it was poised to be the next big hit in animation. I've looked at Phineas and Ferb many times before, but after over a year of covering Disney Channel's biggest cash cow, the time has finally come to give its mistreated younger sibling its due and try and figure out why it was on the hit list of every executive at the studio. Hiya folks, welcome to the show. My name's the Gliding Gladiator, and it's my mission to info dump about everything Disney animation on the internet. It has been 5 years since the world was first shown Milo Murphy's Law, the Phineas and Ferb follow-up that seemed almost dead on arrival because Disney were determined to do everything in their power to stop it from succeeding. And as someone who strongly believes that network executives should be charged for their crimes, I'm going to take a look back at the history of Milo Murphy's Law and hopefully try and rationalise the show's depressing fate. So after months of hints and teasers, let's finally take a look back at this little show that could. If Disney let it. First, let's go back to the distant year of 2015, which will go down in history as the final year before the world started to implode. After surviving 8 years on the Disney Channel, Phineas and Ferb came to an end. Sort of. And you already know the rest of that story. But there was a good 2 years where the endless summer reached its stopping point. So the big question for creators Dan Povenmire and Jeff Swampy Marsh was, what now? They had been working on this show since the early 90s and had never once taken their focus off getting it picked up, even when they were working on different shows. Even when the pair lived on opposite sides of the world. And they'd done it. Their dream passion project not only got made, but had gone further than anyone could have ever imagined. So what did they do after creating the biggest animated series Disney had ever seen? Simple. Do it all over again. In May of 2015, it was announced the duo were working on a brand new series titled Mikey Murphy's Law, but after realising that title is certifiably horrible, they changed the name to Milo and the rest is history. There was about a year's wait between the show's announcement and release, and in that time, a lot of people didn't really know what to make of it. I mean, outside of the basic premise, we knew practically nothing about this show. I mean, it's Dan and Swampy, so we all knew it was going to be funny, wholesome, and have a stellar soundtrack. But this was the second show the duo had ever created. So, did lightning strike twice, or was there a valid reason Disney quickly buried this under a pile of debris? Only one way to find out. Airing from 2016 to 2019, Milo Murphy's Law is a series that follows the day-to-day life of Milo Murphy, a descendant of Murphy's Law which states anything that can go wrong will go wrong, thus heavily impeding his day-to-day life as now relatively mundane activities like walking to school become a life or death situation. However, Milo continuously faces each trial and tribulation with his friends, an unrelenting positive attitude, and his trusty backpack, which every morning he packs vigorously in order to account for any eventuality. Milo is such an aspirational character with how he always faces the unknown with a smile. His endless optimism could have easily come off as annoying, but thanks to the great writing and phenomenal performance by Weird Al, Milo is never not an endearing and lovable protagonist. On the opposite side of the spectrum is Zach Underwood, the new kid in town who becomes fast friends with Milo despite his ever-present fear of everything. Yet through every difficult science project and runaway train, he never once regrets his choice and accepts Milo for who he is and all the chaos that comes with him. Melissa Chase is Milo's oldest childhood friend who, prior to Zach moving to Danville, is the only person in town outside of Milo's family who enjoys his company and fully embraces Murphy's Law as part of her life. In terms of supporting cast, there's Milo's loving family, which includes his dad Martin, his mum Bridget, his sister Sarah, who is a huge nerd, and their dog Dioja, who has a habit of getting into situations he shouldn't be in until Milo tells him him to go home. Then there's Milo's classmates, including Amanda Lopez, a girl obsessed with maintaining order which doesn't really fly with Murphy's Law, Bradley Nicholson, who is the most openly hostile towards Milo mainly because he's jealous of all the attention he gets, and Elliot Decker, who is the crossing guard of the school and a man obsessed with safety who seeks to protect the world and everyone in it from Milo. The basic outline for a Milo Murphy's Law episode is that Milo and his friends attempt a seemingly everyday and mundane activity only for Murphy's Law to complicate things, as Milo tries to keep things contained. However, every problem he seems to solve only ends up creating 3 more. In the end, despite the odds being stacked against him, Milo makes out on top as everyone grows a little more accepting of him. Rinse and repeat for 65 episodes and you've got a series, right? Well, not exactly, because very much like Milo himself, there was a new unpredictable element that Dan and Swampy threw into the mix: overarching storylines. 2 majorly important characters I neglected to mention are Balthazar Cavendish and Vinny Dakota, whose very appearance changed the episodes. Basically, for the premiere of each episode in the first batch, they'd appear as normal, but then in reruns, people were noticing these 2 distinctly designed characters that were being added into the background. And because this is the internet, people were on this mystery in mere minutes. Then in episode 3A, the duo made their first official appearance as pistachio salesmen. But as season 1 progressed, we learned all was not as it seemed. Cavendish and Dakota are time travelers sent from the future by their boss to stop pistachios from going extinct. But of course, Milo inadvertently wrecks all their plans. Again, this setup is very reminiscent of Phineas and Ferb, with there being 2 concurrently running storylines that always seem to cross over but never quite meet. They could have gotten a lot of mileage out of that with a brief payoff in the finale, but that doesn't happen. Over season 1A, the duo start to take notice of Milo, with Cavendish suspecting him to be an enemy agent sent to thwart their mission. Then in the mid-season finale, rather than continuing to wonder, Dakota walks up and just asks Milo, which sets off a chain reaction of events leading to the reveal of the season's huge overarching story, and what seemed like 2 parallel stories fused together, as Cavendish and Dakota not only continue to grow and develop over the series, but end up becoming a huge part of Milo's life and social circle. Because that's what sets Milo apart from Phineas. Things change. The characters aren't stuck in this infinite loop of going through the motions. They're allowed to learn and grow as people. In particular, I want to highlight Amanda, who in those introductory episodes wants nothing to do with Milo, seeing him as an accident waiting to happen who ruins everything he touches. In a few episodes, we get glimpses of her starting to question how she views Milo, but episode 9B's school dance completely changed everything. In this episode, Amanda is in charge of the school dance and does her best to keep Milo in the corner so he doesn't interfere, only for Murphy's Law to rear its head, and since Amanda doesn't allow Milo to help, it only gets worse until eventually it seems the night is a bust and nothing else could possibly go wrong. So Milo steps up and, using his resourcefulness, is not only able to fix the dance but make it even better. And when Amanda realizes this, any negative feelings she has towards Milo are extinguished as she, like the rest of the school, starts to understand him. And from there, their relationship would only continue to grow over the remainder of the series. The characters and world of Milo Murphy's Law is allowed to change and grow with every episode. No one is confined to these boxes that stop them from finding fulfillment in life. Amanda Lopez is allowed to develop and improve herself as a person. Meanwhile, only a few blocks away, Isabella Garcia Shapiro is entering Phineas's backyard with the same catchphrase, trying hopelessly to telegraph her feelings that will completely fly over his head. A routine she's doomed to repeat until high school. Yeah, an unfortunate effect of Milo Murphy's Law is that it retroactively adds this underlying tragedy to Phineas and Ferb. Deep psychology of Disney Channel cartoons aside, the first season of Milo Murphy's Law provided a strong foundation for such a successful and beloved series that, if it played its cards right, had a decent chance at topping Phineas and Ferb. However, as I'm sure most of you know, that isn't how the story goes. Milo Murphy's Law was cancelled after 2 seasons because it failed to attract a wider audience. It just didn't catch on as much as Phineas and Ferb, and the blame for that lies solely with Disney and their neglectful treatment of the show. You saw the title of this video, you knew where this was going. So, let's see how the mouse sent this lamb to the slaughter before it even learned how to walk. Now hopefully this doesn't get too boring, but to be honest, Season 1's treatment was nowhere near as egregious as the rest of the series, but it's still important to show, even from the start, Disney were not giving this series a chance. With lengthy hiatuses between sporadic episode releases, and not building up any consistent schedule with the show to keep viewers coming back as they had no idea when it would be airing next. After the show's first 5 episodes, it actually did start amassing decent ratings, reaching upwards of 1 million. Then it went on hiatus until March, where the ratings dropped dramatically, now struggling to get past 0.2 million. At the end of March, the show went on hiatus again, returning in July for the mid-season finale, missing Milo. If you remember, that was the episode I mentioned earlier as the moment the show jumps into its overarching story with its first huge event storyline. The show would resume airing in late September, where the rest of Season 1 was burned off in the span of a week, including the big season finale, which received little to no advertisement. Despite the season finale already airing, there were 2 episodes left over, a Halloween and Christmas special, which of course aired in October and December respectively. And while they didn't pull amazing numbers, they were a lot better than the episodes preceding them. But while premieres are good at getting a show up and running, what truly makes it a success is the reruns. The more a show airs, the more chance someone channel surfing is bound to come across it and take interest. Someone better tell today's network executives that, because there are a shocking amount of cartoons that don't get consistent reruns. And this was the case with Milo Murphy's Law. Disney barely reran the show, which already spelled disaster, but in case you forgot, a big aspect of the show's early days was that 2 of the series' most important characters that introduced the serialized story were planned to only appear in reruns. So this great mystery Dan and Swampy set up was undermined as no one outside of the show's minuscule yet passionate fanbase would notice this change. All that said, things weren't looking too hot for Milo, as by all accounts the series had been completely cast aside by the network that chose to bring it into being. However, Dan and Swampy had one final card up their sleeves to try and save the sinking ship. But unfortunately, despite the valiant effort, it only ended up weighing it down even more. Before the series had even begun, Dan and Swampy teased the possibility of a potential Phineas and Ferb crossover somewhere down the line. But even before the special event team-up, they were not at all shy about the fact these shows took place in the same universe, slowly building up to the moment where we'd finally see our favourite childhood characters back on screen yet again. However, while any show would have done a one-off crossover with some surface level fan service that would probably never get brought up again, Dan and Swampy, as they often do, took it one step further. Through all the callbacks, they had baked this crossover into the very DNA of the show, meaning whenever they did meet, it would not only be a cool event, but would change Milo Murphy's Law forever. And during the Season 1 finale, that change started to take shape.
Wait, you're not the pizza delivery guy. This is my pizza delivery guy trap.
And for a brief moment, Milo Murphy's Law became the talk of the town, with everyone eager to see what would happen next. This was Milo's chance to turn everything around and start being a success. Maybe not on the same level as Phineas and Ferb, but closer to what you're expecting from a Disney show. So naturally that's when the series took a 13-month break for no reason. December 2nd, 2017. That was the date Milo Murphy's Law aired its final episode of its Season 1 order. Then there was radio silence. Not a healthy thing for a show on the verge of making it big. Well, I hate to say it, but it gets worse. It gets so much worse. After a year of nothing, no news, no promotion, barely any reruns, Milo Murphy's Law finally announced the premiere of the second season on December 12th, 2018. The season would premiere with a 40-minute episode titled The Phineas and Ferb Effect, which would air in January 2019. And now, long hiatuses are annoying but very common in the animation industry, especially in the latter half of the 2010s. Animation takes so much time, effort and money, and any episode of a cartoon that comes out is a miracle. But the thing is, the hiatus wasn't so long because they were waiting for these episodes to finish production. Most of Season 2 was finished by mid-2018. And do you want to know how we know this? Because we'd already seen the first half of it. Disney waited so long to premiere Season 2 that by the time it finally did come around, 10 episodes had already been released in Japan Africa, Spain, Germany, and the UK. The one time we get nice things, and it's when Disney is killing off one of my favourite shows. Figures. The first episode of Season 2 to premiere first in the US was episode 16, so only 4 of the 20 episodes from the second season order weren't aired in another country beforehand, which is just pathetic. The reason the season started early everywhere else was due to the Phineas and Ferb crossover, which was envisioned as a big summer event that would break up the hiatus between seasons 1 and 2 by airing in the middle of 2018. This is what they did in Japan and other territories, but for whatever reason the US turned it into the season premiere, not to mention barely giving it any promotion, which is crazy. You'd really think they'd be hyping up the first new Phineas and Ferb content in 3 years. But as I previously talked about in my Candace Against the Universe video, by the time Phineas and Ferb ended, the world had sort of moved on. They wanted more complex shows with long-running character arcs and serialized stories, which is exactly what Milo was, yet it still wasn't able to catch on. When Disney did at last start airing season 2, it finally received a consistent schedule, airing the entire season weekly without any hiatuses, which is honestly the least they could do. Remember a second ago when I said how the Phineas and Ferb crossover would change the series? Well, that moment is now, because Milo Murphy's Law was about to undergo a huge transformation, and unfortunately, the thing that was supposed to save the show only ended up sealing its fate. Before I continue, let me just say, I love Season 2. It has some of the show's best episodes, the character arcs continued to get better, and the sheer amount of creative ideas the season packs in is astounding. Without giving away too many spoilers about the show's overarching story, because I need to give people as many reasons to watch this show as possible, the Season 2 premiere concludes with Doofenshmirtz's apartment building being destroyed, and as such he now has to live with the Murphys, becoming a main character for the show's second season. And with this introduction comes the inclusion of Perry and the OWCA as reoccurring elements, with entire episodes dedicated to them that don't necessarily involve Milo all that much. I don't want to sound cynical, but there are points this season where it almost feels like Dan and Swampy have given up on Milo Murphy's Law and just want to do more Phineas and Ferb. And given Disney's treatment of the series during season 1, I really can't blame them. I mean, coming off their outrageous decade-spanning success, they likely weren't anticipating how difficult it would be to get their next big idea off the ground, and definitely weren't expecting the network to actively sabotage it. Still, it's very disheartening to see them just throw in the towel this early. However, Doof himself is a great character, and I did enjoy his inclusion, since for the first time they were able to give him a real in-depth character arc that picks up on his redemption from the Phineas and Ferb finale, showing him struggling to be good, which is especially difficult since it's been previously established that Doof does more harm being good than when he's evil. But then there's also this new element where we learn he is destined to invent time travel. So now he embarks on his journey of benevolence while also having this impending future hanging over his head, unsure if he'll be able to live up to his own legend, and that's a really well written and compelling character conflict that is so nice to see. But then there's also a really weird subplot where Doof and Perry break up after Doof learns Perry has only been hanging out with him to keep him out of trouble as part of his job, essentially repeating and elongating a storyline that was already done way better in Phineas and Ferb Season 1. As for the Milo stuff for this season, as I said, it carries on exactly where Season 1 left off, with much more focus going to the side characters and their development. Amanda and Milo start an adorable little romance, Zach has an underlying narrative about trying to get over his fears, Cavendish and Dakota temporarily break up following them getting demoted to picking up alien trash, which by the way, the writers must have really been confident enough to do this story twice in the same season at the same time. Also, a lot more screen time gets devoted to Milo's family. It's all really good and fun and wholesome. Now, I didn't spoil Season 1's overarching storyline because it had an infrequent enough presence in most episodes that I could get through all my points without having to address it in major detail, but when talking about Season 2 and the series finale, that isn't possible as this storyline is much more involved than the previous one. So Season 2 focuses focuses heavily on aliens, specifically aliens that have a unique interest in Milo. However, every time they try and abduct him, Murphy's Law gets in the way. The closest they get is the mid-season finale fittingly named Abducting Murphy's Law, where Milo is finally brought onto the alien ship, but Murphy's Law causes malfunctions with their language translators.
What I'm trying to say is that you are delicious. Appetizing. Scrumptious.
No, the commander's trying to say that you're the white meats, the dark meats, the neck, and the giblets.
But Milo can only keep Murphy's Law at bay for so long and gets flung out of the ship where his friends are waiting to catch him. The episode ends with Milo wondering what the aliens wanted. The last 4 or so episodes before the finale turned out some of the best material in the entire show. They gave Doofenshmirtz a break and shifted the focus almost entirely back to Milo and his friends, allowing us to spend some great final moments with the original cast. One of my favourite episodes of the entire series is the Mid-Afternoon Snack Club, which, on top of being a great homage to the iconic 80s classic, uses that to delve deeper into its characters than ever before, giving us new insight into them as well as containing the funniest joke in the entire series.
You're welcome, animators!
There's this idea that when someone is close to death, they start to perk up a bit, as for a brief moment, that spark of life comes back into their eyes right before it's stamped out for good. And I think you can make a case of that happening with Milo Murphy's Law. After some course correction, the show was only getting better and better, and really felt like it was about to hit its stride. But unfortunately, the damage had already been done, and Season 2 would be the show's last. So that's how we got here. Let's see what we got by talking about the series finale of Milo Murphy's Law. The finale actually begins with episode 19B of Season 2, Milo in Space. An episode that functions as a conclusion for all the side stories that have spanned the second half of Season 2. Cavendish and Dakota reunite, Doof and Perry make up, but the main thing that happens is that the aliens, who are called the Octalians, return and take Milo, having to keep moving him to different ships as Murphy's Law brings each one down, ending on a dramatic cliffhanger of Milo drifting through space until the rest of the cast find him after repairing one of the ships that crash-landed in an earlier episode. Milo in Space is a really fun episode with some nice wholesome moments, but it's mostly just there to set up the final episode. We finally learn just what the Octalians have wanted with Milo all season, to face off against their own much more intense variation of Murphy's Law that they call the Sphere of Calamity, which is made out of negative probability ions, something we're familiar with from both Phineas and Ferb and the crossover special. If Milo can't stop the sphere and what they've dubbed Orgaloof's Law, it'll continue to grow until it envelops their whole world. Meanwhile, we briefly take a moment to give Zack a conclusion to his arc.
Look, we've faced time-traveling nut monsters, more wayward construction equipment than I can count, and now we're halfway across the galaxy on an alien world trying to find our friend. Dude, I think I'm done being afraid.
Oh, I like this, Zack.
Milo braves the calamity and makes it inside the sphere, only to find an Octalian girl who we learn is Orgaloof, the alien commander's daughter. She was born surrounded by negative probability ions that have only grown stronger as she's aged until it eventually consumed her. So now it's Milo and friends in the final fight against Murphy's Law.
Barry the Platypus says we're all gonna die. Oh, try. He says we're all gonna try.
But things aren't looking too great until the rest of the Octalians use their shape-shifting powers to give Milo some assistance. Doof helps Milo realize the way to stop the sphere is by having all the Octalians turn into Orgaloof, therefore sharing all the negative probability ions. Milo gives them a speech about facing the unknown, Zack and Melissa kiss, and they all set off back home, thus ending Milo Murphy's Law.
Oops. I think we're gonna need another ship.
And that was that. There was no more calamity to circumvent, no more disasters to overcome. Milo Murphy's Law was gone. Dan and Swampy switched their focus to the new Phineas and Ferb movie they were making for Disney+, demonstrating how Milo really was just supplementary content, something to fill in the gap while Phineas and Ferb took a break. That's not to say Dan and Swampy didn't care about Milo, it's clear they still hold a lot of love for the characters and this show as a whole. It's just a shame that love wasn't shared by all the people making the shots. And we will see Milo again, just as a cameo in an upcoming Phineas and Ferb project. And a lot of people are going to watch that and never know that this random background character used to have his own show, and a pretty damn good one at that. Looking back on the story of Milo Murphy's Law, I find some weird sense of irony to it, because very much like the show, everything that could go wrong did. Only this isn't some genetic curse. This is an example of executive incompetence and people in suits having some weird vendetta against the show. Yet while working on this video, going back to the show and examining its fate, one final question has started to form in my mind. A question that I've been putting off because, to be honest, it's too painful to think about. Even if the network had done everything right, would Milo have still struggled to find an audience? Would it have just gotten lost next to shows like Star vs. and Ducktales? Maybe it wasn't all Disney's fault. Maybe it was just the market speaking and they didn't want a show so heavily tied to a decades-old property. Was Milo Murphy's Law doomed from the start? That is a question way too big and complicated for me to unpack, so I'm afraid I'm just going to have to leave that one with you. If you're new around here, feel free to subscribe and comment down below as it helps me out a whole lot. Also, I would just like to give a big thank you to the wonderful, beautiful soul that is Charles Dugan for supporting me on Patreon. If you want to receive a shout out at the end of each and every video, as well as other perks such as early access to new content and an invite to my private Discord server, you can do so by heading over and becoming a member of my Patreon. Link is in the description and comments below. However, as always, it is completely optional and I greatly appreciate every single person who watches and enjoys my content. Thanks so much for watching, folks, and I'll see ya real soon.